I've always wanted to draw really cute and pretty art. When I was a young kid, I got swept into the world of digital art when I stumbled upon artists on YouTube. These artists would post those nostalgic speed paint videos in addition to creating their own mini anime series. Needless to say, I was inspired and started creating digital art with my mouse on Microsoft Paint. Though shortly after, I took an art break that lasted a few years. When I decided to draw again, it didn't come as easily as it did when I was younger. These are some of the things that I drew after my art break. It didn't really help that I was surrounded by people who were miles ahead of me artistically, which left me feeling even more discouraged and behind. I actually drew a lot. I guess looking back now, I definitely got better than when I first started, though at the time, it felt like the art that I wanted to create was so out of reach. I drew for a few more years after getting back into art, and while I knew there was some progress, it just felt so far from what I wanted my art to look like. Something that made it even harder was that sometimes I'd see amazing art online and then find out the artist was only 13. It made me feel really discouraged. I think at some point after trying to get better, I decided that being a good artist maybe wasn't for me. It felt like no matter how hard I tried, I would never be able to create the kind of art I wanted to make. While I took a break from drawing, I pursued other things like design, a little bit of coding, and music. I still doodled and drew, but it wasn't anything related to my original goal. During this time, I relied a lot on tutorials because I was learning a lot of skills from scratch. Eventually, I stumbled upon art tutorials. I actually never really followed art tutorials when I was younger. I mainly tried to draw from imagination and reference. Even after my art break, I kept following the principles I learned when I was younger, even though they were unreliable and quite frankly incorrect. It finally dawned on me that if I actually follow art tutorials and guidelines, maybe the art I want to create is achievable. I watched people talk about how they improved from not knowing how to draw to being able to make really nice art, and that gave me hope. I felt like if tutorials and resources helped me in other creative fields, maybe they could help me in reaching my art goals too. So after giving up once, I decided to try again. I'd use the resources available, practice making the things I actually want to make, and see where it goes from there. To give you a better idea of where I started, here are some of the things that I drew before beginning this journey. I didn't draw very often, and as you can see, my work was pretty unpolished. But more importantly, I was never able to achieve the style that I wanted. There was a big gap between what I wanted my art to look like versus what it actually looks like. Some of the art concepts that I personally struggled with were 1. Symmetry. Every time I drew a face and flipped it, a monster would look back at me. It took me hours of flipping back and forth just to get something barely symmetrical. 2. Line art. Line art has always been a struggle for me. Whenever I tried lining my sketches, everything looked distorted, wobbly, and wonky. I eventually defaulted to skipping line art entirely and just cleaning up my sketch, but I really wanted to give line art another go because it would make coloring so much easier. 3. Anatomy. Drawing different poses, either complex or simple, was really challenging for me, and as you can see from my current and older pieces, anatomy was definitely one of my biggest pain points. And number 4, coloring. No matter what I did, I could never render my pieces in the way that my favorite artists did. I wanted to improve so I could finally bring the kind of vibes that I love into my own artwork. I started with looking at art tutorials on TikTok, Instagram Reels, and Pinterest. They broke down art concepts quickly and in a way that was easy to understand. I know there are probably better ways to learn, but I wanted to keep things low pressure to keep myself motivated. I started with some face guide tutorials I found on Pinterest. Not too long after following the guides, I realized that they actually help a lot. I didn't actually use face guides correctly in the past, so that probably played a big role in why my faces looked wonky. My faces are far from perfect, but they look noticeably a lot more symmetrical than before, and I also spend a lot less time flipping back and forth. After that, I moved on to anatomy tutorials. Again, I looked on Pinterest and found a few tutorials to follow. I started doing some studies and also started referencing IRL photos to check my anatomy. I would also pose in the mirror and ask people around me to pose to better understand how the body works. It didn't feel like I made a huge improvement, but when I put my old art side by side with my newer work, I can definitely see that I had improved. As I mentioned before, I wrote off line art because my line art would look 10 times worse than the sketch. This time, I really wanted to give line art an honest effort. Some tips I saw online was to turn on the brush stabilizer. With the brush stabilizer turned on, I quickly noticed that my line art was a lot less shaky. However, it still looked a little flat. Last month, my friends and I did an art trade where I got to practice lining a friend's sketch, and I also got to study how they did line art. For my sketch, I really wanted to make it cleaner than usual as someone else would be lining my art. I then decided for practice to line my clean sketch and noticed that my line art looked a lot better than normal. It might be common sense to some people, but a clean sketch yields better line art. I honestly didn't spend as much time as I wanted studying coloring and rendering, so I don't really have too much to add here. That said, working with clean line art really made the coloring process a lot faster and easier. I experimented a little bit with lighting in this piece, playing around with different layer styles. I also tried a few new methods for rendering eyes. In the past, I usually didn't render eyes at all, so this part felt new and exciting. I definitely want to learn more and to continue developing my rendering skills. To sum up my art journey, this is where I started, and this is what my art looks like now, just after a few weeks of very casual practice. I feel pretty good about my progress, especially since I approached this so casually and kept it really low-key. Before I started, I honestly thought I'd never get any better. The tutorials also really opened my eyes to the things that I can work on, and knowing that makes me feel like the cute, pretty art style I want is actually achievable. Thank you for watching this video. I really hope you guys found this inspiring. If you enjoyed this, please give this video a like and subscribe as it really helps out my channel. I will see you guys in the next video.